Hey guys, and welcome to Petrol Ped. Now, looking at my back catalogue, I reckon I've only ever had two Peugeots on the channel. The iconic 205 GTI, the 1.9 litre version, and a Peugeot 508, but that was some time ago, so I thought I'd best put that one right. So I reached out to Peugeot and I got my hands on the car behind me, the 308 station wagon. Now, I actually started off my driving career, as it were, in Peugeots. My driving instructor's car was a diesel Peugeot 205, and my dad, at the time I was learning to drive, had a Peugeot 309. And those were the first cars I ever drove on the public highway. I've never owned a Peugeot, but they've always been a brand that's been quite close to my heart, and they have made some epic cars in the past. My favourites are probably, like many of you, 205 GTI, 309 GTI Goodwood, always like that one, and the 405 MI16x4, always like that one too. You can kind of tell my vintage. But in the last few years, Peugeot have gone through a little bit of a brand update. They have a new logo. I'm not a massive fan. I think from a distance it does look a little bit like a Proton logo. Sorry, Peugeot. But I think on the whole they have some really interesting cars out there. And I mentioned I drove the 508 Saloon a few years ago, and I still think that's one of the best looking saloon cars on the market, and the estate version of that I really like. So when I wanted to get my hands on another Peugeot, just to see where the brand is, just to try and get my head around their range of cars, I chose the 308 station wagon or estate. And I thought the plug-in hybrid drivetrain would be interesting to explore as well. And I've had this car for pretty much a week now, and I've done a lot of miles in it. I've used it all week and I've been all over the country, and it is filthy. So before anybody has a moan at me, I haven't given it a wash. I've got lots of things on today, and I thought, do you know what? This is the patina of my week with the car. But the week I've spent with the car has taught me a great deal about this car, particularly the drivetrain, and I think I've got a good idea about the things I like and the things I'm not so keen on. But the first thing I want to talk about is styling, and we'll start off with the outside. Now, it's a beautiful sunny day today, so I'm certainly not going to complain. Spring is here. I've even had the grass cut today. But it does mean that the sun is making filming a little bit challenging, so apologies for that. So let's start front end styling. This view, I really like the front end styling of this car. I like this front grille, I like the headlamps, and I think from the front end angle, maybe just coming around the front 3/4 angle, it's a handsome looking car. It's got echoes of the 508, and I've already mentioned I really like that. Told you it was disgracefully dirty. The complete rear view isn't too bad either. I quite like the lights. It's a little bit fussy. There's a little bit too much going on. One of the few press cars I've had with a tow bar that doesn't actually retract. So it's a little bit ugly sticking out there, but imagine that's not there. It doesn't look too bad. So if you look at the car directly from the front or directly from the back, it's not bad. My challenge is when you try and combine the front and the rear, it just kind of all goes a little bit wrong for me. The front end, the lines and the sculpting kind of come round to about here and stop, and that's okay. The rear, that kind of comes around and comes to about here, and that stops, and that's kind of okay. My issue with the car is I don't think they kind of join together. It doesn't, for me, it doesn't flow down the side of the car. It doesn't look like one car. It almost, this is going to sound very harsh, it looks a bit like a cut and shut. It doesn't really look like the front and the rear are meant to go together. And then you've got this sill trim down here that stops there. And why doesn't that stop there? It just kind of, yeah. And then I'm not a big fan of Aeroblade wheels at the best of times. So it's a shame for me. The car has good angles, but when you try and put them together, sorry, it doesn't really work. But let's talk about practicality, because it does have lots of space and it does have some good things. Now, one of the cool things about it being a station wagon is it has a really healthy sized boot, and I've been carrying lots and lots of stuff around in here this week. So, you know, the side silhouette, it does have almost like a shooting brake format, really. It's got this teardrop shape, and that does affect the aperture size and the roof height in the rear boot, but there's still plenty of space and loads of luggage space. And then you have got a little bit of kind of underfloor for things like cables and stuff. So very, very practical indeed. But I'm going to jump in the front of the car and we'll talk more about the interior, and then the drivetrain and drive part is really, really interesting. It is a bit small in here. So there isn't a huge amount of rear passenger leg room. You've got loads of boot space, but the compromise, I think, is in rear passenger room. Definitely 2 seats for adults, but this seat is set for me, and I don't have a great deal of leg room at all. But then I guess if you wanted that extra leg room, that's where you'd go for a 508, right? You'd have the longer wheelbase, you'd have more space. But what is noticeable as soon as you come and sit inside the car is the material choice, and the trim spec in here is really very, very nice. This car doesn't have a glass roof, and I'd like that. I'm just more of a fan of having that light in the car. So does feel a little bit dark and oppressive in here. But let's jump inside the front, because the modern day Peugeot has a design feature that I'm not completely convinced about. Okay, the only place to start in here is with that steering wheel. I remember it from the 508, and it is a really challenging thing to get used to for me. The idea is, side to side, it just feels like a normal steering wheel. It's a bit like a yoke, really, but with a top bar. But the idea is, in a normal car, you would look through the steering wheel at the instrument binnacle. In this car, you set the wheel and you look over the top of the steering wheel at the instrument binnacle. And my challenge with that is I can't quite get, and whether it's just the oddities of my leg length and my body size, I can't quite get to the point where the steering wheel is comfortable in its height so that I can see over the top of the steering wheel and see the instrument binnacle. And I know that that's just a design quirk. I quite like it in a way, but I just can't quite get that positioning right, if that makes sense. Other things in here, there's a lot of familiarity down here, certainly the gear selector and drive mode selector, to the Vauxhall Astra EV Hendy Long Termer I'm running currently. It's very Stellantis. So there's a lot of run over between the different Stellantis brands, of which clearly Peugeot is one. If we just start the car and certainly bring all of the various electronics to life, you've got a full touchscreen display here with Apple CarPlay, which I've been using for my time in the car. And then you've got a set of quick keys here, Apple CarPlay, phone nav, climate, media and home, to help you get to the quick places on there. The native MMI I find a little bit clunky and a little bit difficult to navigate. So I've basically just gone into Apple CarPlay all the time. And then in terms of climate controls, there are no fixed buttons. There's one button there, but all that does is it opens up the climate control menu on the touch screen, and then you have to do everything through the touch screen. The other way you can do that is just to click the climate control button on there. So the infotainment system, I've just been using CarPlay, if I'm brutally honest. The central column here, I've got a little kind of box to put some stuff. I've got a couple of USB-C ports. I've got a little mat here for a phone, and then again another mat there for a phone. And then the trim, I really like this kind of lime green accent on the stitching. And when you go into sport mode, the dials have a lime green accent as well. So that kind of brings the car together, and you've got sort of leatherette on the top of the dash, quite a nice choice of materials, and a kind of Alcantara material just there. So it's a really nice feeling interior. But let me just talk about the drivetrain. So it's a plug-in hybrid. Now, I have had this on charge on my 7 kilowatt Zappi charger overnight, and it's fully charged, and it's indicating an EV only range of 26 miles. Because it's a plug-in hybrid, I can go into the drive mode selector and select EV only, and it will run as an EV only. It's not the most powerful and performance oriented EV. If you push the throttle too hard, it will fire up the internal combustion engine. But only 26 miles, that's a bit disappointing for me. I know it means the battery pack's smaller and the car's lighter and arguably probably a bit cheaper as well. But there are hybrids out there, plug-in hybrids, that will give you a range of maybe 50 or 60 miles, and I think that makes it far more usable. When the petrol tank is full, it's about £50 to fill up with normal unleaded 95 RON petrol. You're going to get a petrol range of about 400 to 420 miles. So when you've got a full battery and a full petrol tank, you've got quite a long range in the car. The thing I want to explore and talk about when we go driving is the hybrid part. Yesterday, I drove all the way to the Cotswolds, and when I left home, the car defaulted itself into EV, and I wasn't really kind of with it in the morning, and I was thinking about the day and the shoot I had ahead of me, and I probably did 5 or 6 miles before I realised it was running as an EV only. It's such a quiet car anyway. So I depleted that down to about 20 miles of EV range. So I then turned it into hybrid. But by the time I hit 36 miles, the battery was gone. And I was on internal combustion engine only. And the challenge I have with the car is, and I may well be wrong, and I've had a look in all the different menus and so on, is there's no hold mode. In a lot of plug-in hybrids, there's a mode where you can basically hold it and it will prioritize the internal combustion engine and try and keep that battery state so that you can deploy it when you need it the next time you go into a town or a city and you want to run as EV only. So there's no hold facility, and then once the battery pack is depleted, there's no charge up while you're going facility either. The only way you can get it back up is to plug the car in. So the challenge with that is fuel efficiency. So I want to do a bit of a test. I've got to go to Silverstone on Sunday for a test with my mate Oliver from Le Mans Coupes, which is going to be an amazing day. Video coming to the channel soon. And what I thought I'd try and do is a bit of a range test on camera to try and have a look at that and see what our fuel economy is. Because if you've got some battery, you can see a fuel economy figure of 80 or 90 miles per gallon. But if the battery's gone, then your fuel economy is much more likely to be in the mid-30s. So that's my challenge with this car. I think the hybrid part, the EV only running part, I would want it to have a longer EV only range, and I want it to be able to maintain that battery state so that I could deploy it as and when I want to, rather than just the car deciding it and running down your battery so that suddenly you've got no battery left. So that's the challenge I have with the car. So there are some good things. This car is a very nice place to do a long journey. It's very comfortable, very smooth, and very quiet. So the next thing, we're going to spring forward a couple of days to Sunday, and we're going to go on a drive up to Silverstone, and we're going to do a bit of an efficiency range test. I must be mad. It's sparrows. It's like 6:30 on a Sunday, but I am going motor racing, so this is all good. So I thought I would start off by just get my gate open. Put it in drive, and we'll get going. So I've only got half a tank of fuel, but I thought I'd just start the video at a full battery state, which is 24 miles indicated. So the idea is, now by default I'm pretty sure that this thing has gone straight into EV drivetrain. It has. So I'm just going to go to the drive select mode, put it into hybrid, and then try and see. We'll also reset the trip. Right, so trip's reset. hybrid drivetrain, 24 miles. Let's see how we get on. Now I am going to be using Waze as my navigation aid. I've set
hazard reported ahead.
Yeah.
Life is full of obstacles.
Yeah, there's lots of potholes there.
Overcome them that matters.
I need to be there at 8:30. ETA's 8:37. Oh!
Entering speed enforcement zone. Exiting average speed enforcement zone.
I love it when you cut across that road. The light isn't great because it's still, dawn is still happening, but there's a nice bit of road here, and I thought I'd just talk about driving this car down a nice piece of road, because I feel like I've been quite hard on this car so far. But honestly, once you actually get going and you start driving, it's a really pleasant place to be. It has very good road manners. It's not massively quick, but it's got quite a smooth, the whole drivetrain's quite smooth. The transition between EV and hybrid or internal combustion engine is really smooth. At the moment I'm on the petrol engine, and it has a really nice feeling steering, and it has nice balance. I've got B mode engaged, so I've got a bit of regenerative braking just to try and eke out that battery pack as long as possible. But when you do get a nice bit of tarmac, it's actually a very, very nicely handling car, and that doesn't really surprise me, because the Peugeots I've driven in the past, even the older ones, always had really nice road holding and a really nice feel to them. And this car is quite surprising, because I think from the outside you would look in and think it maybe is a bit of a floaty boat and it's not going to give you any driving pleasure. And the reality is, actually, it's totally the opposite. It's got a really nice feel to it. Now, the downside of driving more enthusiastically is clearly, especially if you're in the kind of eco mode that I'm in at the moment, trying to eke out that EV power pack. Good girl, she's out at 7 o'clock in the morning on a bike. Legend. Is that's going to have a bit of a detrimental effect to your fuel economy. Now, I'm not going to be boring and make this whole driving portion of the review about fuel economy, but just a bit of a heads up so far. We are 20 miles in, and I've still got 17 miles of battery pack left, and my current MPG is 42 miles to the gallon, which kind of is quite indicative, I think, is that if you are, you know, using the internal combustion engine more than the electric powertrain, guess what, everyone? You're going to use petrol, and your MPG is going to go down. It's not rocket science, really. So that's all my fun. It's nearly light enough to be making videos. I'm now on the A34, and I've just come on and put the adaptive cruise control on, and then I'm just going to sit here for the next 70 miles pretty much. When you are cruising, this is where, for me, this car comes into its own. It's such a comfortable place to be. I've done a lot of miles in this car this week, as I've said already, and the seats are comfortable. It's got a nice steady feeling when you are in cruise, and the visibility is good, so you can just relax and you can get to your destination, you know, with as little fatigue as possible. I mentioned about the steering wheel and not being able to see all of the dials. I can, so just sat here in a normal position, I can see all the important dials. I guess the bit I can't see is just below the two round dials at the moment. There's like a little Peugeot logo. I can't see that, but that's not giving me any information. So it's not that I can't see it, it's just, and I think I've kind of got the right position now. Now, in terms of power utilization when you are in cruise, my MPG is now creeped up to over 40, so 45 MPG currently after 36 miles, and I'm hoping that that's going to keep increasing, and I've still got 11 miles of EV battery in the battery pack. But there's good news and bad news. Let's do the good news, because this is the car review part. The good news is I'm just approaching 100 miles. I'm not that far from my destination, and after 100 miles I'm averaging 44.7 MPG, and I still have 4 miles of battery range. So it's lasted a lot longer than the last journey I did, where it was gone within about 35. And I've sat on the dual carriageway at 70 miles an hour with the adaptive cruise on. The bad news is it's chucking it down with rain. I'm going to Silverstone because I've got a test day today in a hyper racer, which is basically a single seat, full downforce, Hayabusa bike engine track weapon. And we were going to be running it on slicks, but I don't think that's going to happen. I'm actually not massively confident we're going to get any running in today at all. But stay tuned to the channel, there'll be a video coming soon. But as I get near my destination, my final thoughts on this 308 station wagon, it's a really mixed one. I think I've been very honest, and I always try to be honest with reviews, and sometimes, you know, especially on the aesthetic side of things, it's a very personal thing. And for me personally, the external aesthetics just don't work really. They don't knit together. But I'm sure some of you will look at this car and think it's great. So that's just a personal thing. Internally, I actually think the interior I like a lot, apart from the steering wheel. I just can't get my head around this design concept that Peugeot have gone with, where you look over the top of the steering wheel. I don't know what was wrong with a normal type steering wheel, but I guess it's a point of difference, and I got on with it in the 508, so it's not that bad. Actually, when your hands are here and you're driving, it's really nice, and it's got a lovely feel to it. It's just a weird thing to look over the top of the steering wheel. And then the hybrid drivetrain, it's just the longevity of that battery range is the challenge for me. It's not a great deal anyway, mid-20s, 24, 25 miles of pure EV running. But it's just the fact that it can't maintain itself while you're driving along. And I find that quite challenging, because, you know, at the end of my journey, I'm 100 miles in, I've pretty much got no battery pack left. And I've got to do 100 miles back home again this afternoon, which means I'll do the whole journey on internal combustion engine only, unless I stop and have a charge. And it's not a massive battery pack, so it doesn't take that long to charge, but it only accepts AC charging. You can't stick a DC charger in there. So, you know, I would either need to find a charger at Silverstone or park up for an hour and a half to top that battery pack back up again. And I'm just not, I don't see a massive benefit in doing that. I would rather just put a bit more fuel in, to be honest. So for me, it's as a plug-in hybrid fan, this is a plug-in hybrid that kind of doesn't quite work for me. It's great fun to drive, it's quite responsive. You put it in sport mode, it really is. It is quite responsive, and it's got a nice feel to it on the road. So a really interesting one. I've driven this car a lot this week, and I was kind of struggling to get my head around what my final thoughts would be. I'd love to know what you guys think. Please put it in the comments below. But for now, I'm gonna I'm gonna pray a little bit to the weather gods that the rain stops, but having had a look at my weather app, I don't think that's going to happen, because it needed to be dry today, people. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Comments below are always welcome. And if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Petrol Ped for plenty more content to come. And I'll see you on the next film. You take care, guys. Drive safe.